The year is 711 AD. The world holds its breath, balanced on the knife edge of a new era. In the foggy pre-dawn haze of the North African coast, a sense of unease hangs heavy in the salt-laced air. Thousands of Berber warriors, freshly converted to the new faith of Islam, stand on the shore, their eyes fixed on the turbulent waters of the strait that separates them from a land they call Al-Jazira al-Qadra, the Green Island. This narrow channel of water, known to the ancients as the Pillars of Hercules, is more than just a geographical barrier. It is a psychological one, a gateway to a world unknown, a realm of myth and legend, the kingdom of the Visigoths. Their leader, a man whose name would soon be etched into the annals of history, is Tariq ibn Ziyad. He is not a king or a caliph, but a governor, a military commander under the Umayyad Caliphate of Damascus. He stands among his men, feeling the same mix of apprehension and anticipation that ripples through the ranks. The mission is audacious, almost unthinkable, to cross the sea and challenge the might of the Visigothic kingdom, a power that has ruled the Iberian Peninsula for centuries. The ships are small, the sea is treacherous, and the enemy is numerous. Failure is not just a possibility, it is a probability. As the first rays of sunlight pierce the morning mist, the order is given. The warriors, clutching their spears and swords, board the vessels. The wooden planks groan under their weight. They are a motley but determined force, drawn from the rugged mountains and vast deserts of North Africa, united by faith and allegiance to their commander. As the ships pull away from the familiar coastline, many look back, perhaps for the last time. Ahead lies only the vast, unforgiving expanse of the sea, and beyond it, a destiny yet unwritten. The crossing is rough. Waves crash against the hulls, and the wind whips the sails. For these men, many of whom have never been to sea, the journey is terrifying. After what feels like an eternity, a shadow appears on the horizon. It grows larger, greener, more real. A colossal rock formation juts out into the sea, a silent, imposing sentinel guarding the entrance to the new world. It is the rock that will one day bear Tariq's name, Jabal, Tariq, Gibraltar. The fleet makes landfall in its shadow. The men spill onto the beaches, their feet sinking into the unfamiliar sand. They are exhausted but exhilarated. They have crossed the threshold, but the sight that greets them is daunting. This land is lush, yes, but it is also fortified. Watchtowers dot the coastline, and the very air seems to hum with the presence of a powerful, entrenched enemy. The Visigothic king, Roderick, is away fighting rebels in the north, but his garrisons are on high alert. Skirmishes break out almost immediately. Tariq's small force wins the initial encounters, but they know these are just a prelude. The full might of the Visigothic army will soon turn its attention south. Days turn into weeks. The initial foothold is secured, but morale begins to waver. The men are far from home, outnumbered, with their backs to a sea that now feels like a prison wall. Whispers of doubt and fear spread through the camp like a contagion. They have won a battle, but the war seems impossible. They speak of the treasures of Iberia, but also of the endless legions of the Goths. Many long for the safety of their homes, for the familiar shores of Africa. It is in this moment of collective doubt, this crucible of fear, that Tariq ibn Ziyad makes a decision that will echo through the ages. It is a decision so bold, so final, that it transcends military strategy and enters the realm of legend. He gathers his men on the shore, the very shore where they first landed. And then, he gives the order. Burn the ships. Flames erupt against the twilight sky. The crackling of burning wood and the hiss of fire meeting water fills the air. The men watch in stunned silence, as their only means of retreat, their only connection to the world they knew, is consumed by fire. Masts collapse into fiery embers, and hulls turn to ash and smoke. The ships that carried their hopes across the sea now become their funeral pyre. There is no going back. Panic and disbelief turn to a cold, hard realization. Their fate is now tied inextricably to this new land. It is either victory or death. There is no third option. With the fires still glowing behind him, casting a dramatic, flickering light upon his face, Tariq climbs a rock to address his stunned army. His voice, steady and powerful, cuts through the night. The words he speaks will become one of the most famous speeches in military history, a masterclass in leadership and motivation. "Oh my warriors," he begins, his voice ringing with conviction. "Whither would you flee? Behind you is the sea, before you, the enemy. You have now no other hope than your own courage and your own constancy." He pauses, letting the weight of his words sink in. He reminds them of their purpose, of the faith that drives them. He speaks not only of conquest, but of destiny. He paints a picture of a decadent and crumbling Visigothic kingdom, ripe for the taking, and contrasts it with their own vigor and righteousness. Remember that you are in this country more unfortunate than the orphans seated at the table of the avaricious master. Your enemy is before you, protected by an innumerable army. He has men in abundance, but you, as your only aid, have your own swords. You can only survive if you snatch your bread from the hands of your foes. You will be loaded with spoils if you vanquish them. He transforms their desperation into their greatest weapon. Their lack of options becomes their singular focus. The burning ships are not a symbol of doom, but of commitment. They are now an army not of invaders, but of settlers, fighting not for spoils to take home, but for a new home to build. The fear that had gripped them is forged into a new, unbreakable resolve. The uncertainty is replaced by a stark and simple clarity: advance and conquer, or perish. This moment is the true beginning of Al-Andalus. It is not just a military campaign. It is the birth of a civilization that will flourish for nearly 800 years. Inspired and unified, Tariq's army marches inland. Near the Guadalete River, they meet the vast army of King Roderick, who has rushed back from the north. The ensuing battle is brutal and decisive. Against all odds, the smaller, more mobile force of Tariq, fired by a desperate courage, shatters the Visigothic lines. King Roderick himself is said to have vanished in the chaos, his fate unknown. The victory is total. The path into the heart of Iberia is now wide open. One by one, the great cities of the peninsula, Cordoba, Toledo, Seville, fall to the advancing forces. What began as a daring raid transformed into a full-scale conquest. The crossing of 711, the burning of the ships, and the speech on the shores of Gibraltar were the crucible in which a new chapter of world history was forged. It was a moment where fear was turned into fuel, where uncertainty was met with an act of absolute, irreversible commitment. The smoke from those burning ships signaled the end of one world, the Visigothic, and the dawn of another. The world of Al-Andalus, a place where for centuries cultures would clash and combine, creating a society renowned for its contributions to science, art, and philosophy. It was a single moment of decision, by a single leader, that changed the destiny of a continent and shaped the world we live in today. Thank you for watching. If this story of courage and destiny inspired you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more journeys into the pivotal moments of history. We'll see you next time. The year is 711. The Iberian Peninsula, once a Roman province and then a Visigothic kingdom, is a land of turmoil. Power struggles, civil wars, and social unrest have left the kingdom fractured and vulnerable. From across the Strait of Gibraltar, a new force emerges. A small army, led by Tariq ibn Ziyad, makes its landing. Their arrival marks not just a conquest, but the beginning of a profound transformation. The dawn of a new civilization that will be known to history as Al-Andalus. This is the story of how a society was built from the embers of conflict, forging a new identity on the Iberian soil. The initial years following the swift conquest were chaotic. The Visigothic state had collapsed, leaving a power vacuum. Local lords, both Visigothic and Hispano-Roman, scrambled to secure their positions, some resisting, others striking deals with the new conquerors. For the common people, the farmers, artisans, and merchants' life was uncertain. The old order was gone, but what would replace it? The answer came not with a single decree, but through a gradual process of establishing a new administration, one that would redefine the very fabric of Iberian society. The conquerors, an army composed of Arabs and newly converted North African Berbers, were not just warriors, they were administrators. Under the authority of the Umayyad Caliphate in Damascus, they began the monumental task of governance. One of the first and most critical steps was to establish a system of justice and order. Musa ibn Yusuf, the governor of North Africa, who followed Tariq, played a key role. He and his successors understood that long-term stability couldn't be maintained by force alone. It required cooperation and a framework of laws that people could trust. They established treaties, known as pacts or sul, with many cities and local magnates. A famous example is the Treaty of Orihuela, signed with the Visigothic Count Theodemir. This treaty guaranteed Theodemir and his subjects the right to practice their Christian faith, retain their property, and govern themselves locally. In return, they agreed to pay a tax, the jizya, and to not aid the enemies of the new rulers. This pragmatic approach was repeated across the peninsula. It prevented widespread destruction and allowed for a relatively peaceful transition of power. It showed the populace that the new rulers were interested in governance, not just plunder. With a basic framework of peace secured, the focus shifted to building the foundations of a new state. The capital of Al-Andalus was initially established in Seville, but was soon moved to Cordoba. This city, once a modest Roman and Visigothic town, was destined for greatness. The new governors began to organize the territory, dividing Al-Andalus into administrative provinces, or curas. These often followed the lines of the old Roman provincial boundaries. Another example of the new rulers building upon existing structures, rather than completely erasing them. A key element of this new administration was the management of land. Vast estates belonging to the Visigothic crown and nobles who had fled or died in battle became state property. Some of this land was distributed among the victorious soldiers as grants. However, a significant portion was kept under state control. Its revenues used to fund the army, the administration, and public works. For the local farmers who had toiled under the oppressive feudal-like system of the Visigoths, this new arrangement sometimes brought relief. The tax system, while new, was often more predictable and less arbitrary than the exactions of the old Visigothic lords. However, this period was not without its challenges. Tensions arose between the Arab ruling class and the Berber soldiers, who felt they had been given less fertile lands and fewer rewards for their role in the conquest. This erupted into a major Berber revolt in the 740s, a crisis that threatened to tear the fledgling state apart. The internal strife mirrored the turmoil happening far away in the heart of the Islamic world. In 750, the Umayyad Caliphate in Damascus was overthrown by the Abbasids. The entire Umayyad royal family was systematically hunted down and eliminated, all except one. A young prince named Abd al-Rahman ibn Muawiyah managed a dramatic and perilous escape. After 5 years on the run, he saw an opportunity in the disunity of Al-Andalus. In 755, he landed on the southern coast of Spain. He was a man with no army and no kingdom, only a legendary name and immense ambition. He skillfully played on the rivalries between the different factions in Al-Andalus. He rallied the supporters of the old Umayyad dynasty, who resented the new Abbasid rulers. In a series of brilliant political and military maneuvers, he defeated the existing governor and, in 756, triumphantly entered Cordoba. He declared himself the independent emir of Al-Andalus, severing political ties with the Abbasid Caliphate in the east. This was a pivotal moment. Al-Andalus was no longer just a distant province. It was a sovereign state, an emirate in its own right. Abd al-Rahman, who would become known as the Falcon of the Quraysh, was the true architect of Al-Andalus. His reign marked the end of the initial chaotic period, and the beginning of a centralized, stable, and prosperous state. He crushed rebellions with an iron fist, but he also focused on construction and civilization. He established a professional, standing army loyal to him personally. He reformed the administration, strengthened the bureaucracy, and initiated ambitious building projects. He is most famous for beginning the construction of the Great Mosque of Cordoba, a structure that would become one of the wonders of the medieval world. He also built palaces, aqueducts to bring fresh water to the city, and lush gardens that were a taste of his lost Syrian homeland. His reign laid the institutional and cultural groundwork for the golden age of Al-Andalus that would follow under his successors. He fostered an environment where science, poetry, and philosophy could begin to flourish. Thus, from the chaos of conquest and the ashes of a fallen kingdom, a new order was born. It was forged through pacts and treaties, built on a new system of administration, and unified by a prince who had escaped death to found a dynasty. The early cities like Cordoba became crucibles where Arab, Berber, and Hispano-Roman cultures mixed, creating something new and vibrant. The journey from the landing of Tariq's army to the establishment of Abd al-Rahman's emirate was the story of how Al-Andalus was not just conquered, but built. It was the creation of a society that, for centuries, would be a beacon of learning, tolerance, and culture in a world just emerging from the Dark Ages. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into the past fascinating, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories from history. We'll see you next time. In the heart of the 10th century, while much of Europe slumbered in what we call the Dark Ages, a city burned so brightly it was known as the light of the world. This was Cordoba, the capital of Al-Andalus, a metropolis of 500,000 souls, and the most advanced city on the continent, a beacon of civilization. It was a place where knowledge was treasured above gold, and where streets were paved and illuminated long before London or Paris even dreamed of such things. Imagine walking through its streets at night. While the rest of Europe was cloaked in a primitive, fearful darkness, Cordoba glowed. 70,000 public lamps, fueled by oil, cast a warm, inviting light upon the city's 90,000 homes, shops, and palaces. These weren't just practical. They were a symbol of a society that had conquered the night, a society that valued safety, commerce, and community life after sundown. The light guided scholars home from late-night debates and illuminated the path for citizens enjoying the cool evening air. It was a spectacle of urban sophistication unheard of anywhere else. But the light of Cordoba was more than just physical. It was intellectual. At the heart of this brilliance was a ravenous appetite for knowledge. Caliph al-Hakam II, a scholar in his own right, amassed a personal library that was the stuff of legend. It was said to contain over 400,000 volumes more books than in all of France at the time. His agents scoured the known world, from Baghdad to Alexandria, purchasing and copying manuscripts on every imaginable subject: philosophy, astronomy, mathematics, poetry. This library wasn't just a private collection. It was the nucleus of a vast intellectual ecosystem. Cordoba boasted over 70 public libraries, open to anyone who wished to learn. This was a city where literacy was not the exclusive privilege of the clergy or nobility. Men and women from all walks of life could read and write. Books were cherished, and the professions of scribe, bookbinder, and illustrator were held in high esteem. The city's main book market was a bustling hub, where ideas were traded as freely as goods. This passion for learning fueled the rise of great centers of education. The Great Mosque of Cordoba was not only a spiritual center, but also one of the most important universities in the world. Scholars and students flocked here from across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Drawn by the promise of free education and intellectual liberty, they studied the works of Aristotle and Plato, which had been lost to much of Europe, but were preserved and expanded upon here in Arabic translations. They debated theology, law, and grammar, pushing the boundaries of human understanding. The curriculum was astonishingly broad. While European learning was largely confined to theology, Cordoba's university embraced a world of science. Students delved into medicine, pioneering surgical techniques and pharmacology. The physician Al-Zahrawi, known in the West as Al-Andalus, wrote a 30-volume encyclopedia of medicine and surgery that would become a standard textbook in European universities for the next 500 years. He invented over 200 surgical instruments, including the forceps, the scalpel, and surgical needles, many of which are still in use today in modified forms. His detailed descriptions of procedures, from amputations to the removal of bladder stones, were revolutionary. In the field of astronomy, Cordoban scholars built advanced observatories. They charted the stars with incredible precision, correcting the ancient calculations of Ptolemy and creating astronomical tables. The Toledan tables, that were used by astronomers like Copernicus centuries later. They understood that the Earth was a sphere and calculated its circumference with remarkable accuracy. The engineer Abbas ibn Firnas even made a legendary attempt at flight, constructing a winged apparatus and launching himself from a tower. Though his landing was rough, his ambition and scientific curiosity perfectly captured the spirit of the age. Mathematics also flourished. The concepts of zero and the decimal system, originating in India and transmitted through the Arab world, were refined and taught in Cordoba. This new mathematics was the language of science and engineering, making complex calculations possible and paving the way for architectural marvels like the Great Mosque itself. With its forest of more than 850 columns and iconic double-tiered arches, Perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of Cordoba's golden age was its culture of coexistence, or convivencia. In a world often torn apart by religious strife, Cordoba was a rare example of a society where Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived and worked side by side, largely in peace. While not a modern utopia of perfect equality, the level of tolerance and collaboration was unparalleled for its time. Non-Muslims were designated as dhimmi, protected people who paid a special tax in return for religious freedom and the right to govern their own communities. Jewish culture, in particular, experienced a spectacular renaissance. Jewish scholars, poets, and philosophers rose to positions of great influence in the caliph's court. Hasdai ibn Shapret, a Jewish physician and diplomat, became one of the caliph's most trusted advisors. The poet and philosopher Solomon ibn Gabriel wrote masterpieces in both Hebrew and Arabic, while the great Maimonides, one of the most influential thinkers in history, was born and educated in Cordoba before his family fled persecution from a later less tolerant regime. This intermingling of cultures created a vibrant, dynamic society. Scholars from all three faiths collaborated, translating texts and sharing ideas. A Christian monk from Germany might study alongside a Jewish philosopher from North Africa and a Muslim astronomer from Persia, all within the walls of Cordoba. This intellectual cross-pollination was the engine of Cordoba's brilliance, proving that diversity was not a weakness, but a profound source of strength and innovation. As we look back from our modern world, the story of Cordoba is more than just a history lesson. It is a powerful reminder. A reminder that no single culture has a monopoly on knowledge or progress. That tolerance and curiosity are the foundations of a truly great civilization. And that even in the darkest of times, a single city can become a light for the entire world. Its glow reaching across the centuries to inspire us still. The legacy of Cordoba is not just in its beautiful architecture or its ancient texts. It is in the enduring idea that humanity's greatest achievements are born when we choose to build bridges instead of walls. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey into the past enlightening, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories from our shared history. Imagine a young prince, barely 20, his world engulfed in flames. His family, the powerful Umayyad caliphs who had ruled for a century from Damascus, are being systematically hunted and slaughtered. This isn't the beginning of a fantasy novel. This is the true story of Abdi al-Rahman, the man who would defy death, cross continents, and build a civilization from the ashes of his fallen dynasty. Our story begins in 750 AD. The Abbasid revolution has triumphed. They call a banquet under the guise of reconciliation, inviting all the Umayyad princes, but it's a trap. As the feast begins, the doors are barred, and the massacre starts. 80 princes are slain in a single night, but one escapes. Abd ar-Rahman, forewarned by his instincts, had refused to attend. He grabs his young son, his brother, and a handful of coins, and flees into the night. The desert is his only refuge. He is no longer a prince, but a fugitive. The Abbasids place a massive bounty on his head. Their black banners are everywhere. Every city, every oasis is a potential trap. He travels by night, hiding by day, his heart heavy with grief and fear. One day, while hiding in a small village, he sees the black flags approaching. He and his 13-year-old brother Yahya dive into the Euphrates River, swimming for their lives. The Abbasid soldiers stand on the bank, promising them amnesty if they return. Yahya, exhausted and scared, hesitates. Abd al-Rahman screams at him, "Don't believe them. Swim." But the boy turns back. Abd al-Rahman can only watch in horror as his younger brother is captured and beheaded on the riverbank. This moment will forever haunt him, fueling a resolve of steel. Alone now, except for his loyal freedman, Beta al-Brahman's journey becomes a legend of survival. He crosses Palestine, Sinai, and into Egypt, always just one step ahead of his pursuers. He's a ghost, a whisper in the wind. For 5 long years, he endures this harrowing existence. He works as a laborer, sleeps in stables, and learns the harsh realities of the world his family once ruled. His only connection to his past is his mother, a Berber woman from North Africa. It's this connection that becomes his lifeline. He makes his way across the treacherous North African coast, seeking refuge among the Berber tribes. Even here, he finds no safety. The local governors are loyal to the Abbasids. He is hunted, betrayed, and forced to flee again and again. At one point, he hides for months in the camp of a nomadic tribe, living in a tent. His royal identity, a dangerous secret. It's during this time of immense hardship that the prince truly becomes a leader. He learns patience, cunning, and the art of winning loyalty, not through birthright, but through character. He is tall, with striking red hair, and a single agile feature that earned him the nickname the Falcon of Quraysh. He possessed a charisma that drew people to him, a quiet strength that inspired hope. While hiding in North Africa, a daring idea takes root. Across the sea lies Al-Andalus, modern-day Spain. It was a land his Umayyad ancestors had conquered, but it was now fractured by infighting between different Arab and Berber factions. It was a chaotic land, but it was also a land full of Umayyad loyalists, soldiers who had served his family and were now disillusioned with the chaos. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but for a man with nothing left to lose, it was everything. He sends his faithful companion, Badr, across the Strait of Gibraltar with a message. Badr, a brilliant diplomat in his own right, navigates the complex political landscape of Al-Andalus. He finds the Umayyad loyalists, the Syrian contingents who felt marginalized, and presents them with a vision, the return of a true Umayyad prince, a leader who could unite them, restore order, and defy the Abbasids. The message electrifies them. A prince of the blood, a survivor of the massacre, is alive. In 755 AD, Abd al-Rahman, now 25 years old, lands on the shores of Spain. He has no army, no wealth, just his name and the burning resolve forged in 5 years of suffering. But that is enough. People flock to his banner, old soldiers, disillusioned tribesmen, and those yearning for stability see in this young prince the answer to their prayers. He is not just fighting for a throne. He is fighting for the memory of his family, for his own survival, and for the future of a land on the brink of collapse. The ruling governor of Al-Andalus, Yusuf al-Fihri, vastly underestimates this newcomer. He sees a desperate fugitive, not the hardened leader Abd al-Rahman has become. He offers him a daughter in marriage and some land, a token gesture to placate him. Abd al-Rahman's reply is simple: I seek not a small portion of this land as a son-in-law, but the whole of it as my ancestral right. The gauntlet was thrown down. The decisive battle takes place outside the city of Cordoba. Abd al-Rahman's army is a patchwork of loyalists, smaller and less equipped than Yusuf's forces. On the morning of the battle, he improvises a standard. He wraps a green turban around a spira symbol of the Umayyads, a stark contrast to the black of the Abbasids. It's a powerful symbol of defiance. The Battle of Masara is fierce. Abd al-Rahman fights in the front lines, his personal courage inspiring his men. Against all odds, they are victorious. In May of 756 AD, Abd al-Rahman enters Cordoba, not as a conqueror, but as its new emir. But taking the throne was the easy part. Holding it would be the challenge of a lifetime. Al-Andalus was a hornet's nest of rebellion. For the next 30 years, Abd al-Rahman would be in a constant state of war. He faced rebellions from rival Arab factions, Berber uprisings, and even plots from the distant Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad, who sent agents and armies to unseat him. He put down more than 25 rebellions. He was ruthless when he had to be, but also incredibly shrewd. He built a professional, loyal army composed of mercenaries and slaves who owed their allegiance to him alone, not to any tribe. He was a master statesman. He knew that military might alone couldn't hold his kingdom together. He began a massive project of construction and unification. His most iconic achievement is the Great Mosque of Cordoba. It wasn't just a place of worship. It was a political statement. He bought the Christian basilica that stood on the site and began construction on a mosque that would rival the grandest structures in Damascus and Baghdad. Its forest of columns and red and white arches became a symbol of his new independent state, a beacon of Umayyad power reborn in the West. He built aqueducts to bring fresh water to the city, fortified its walls, and constructed palaces and gardens that reminded him of his lost home in Syria. He even imported plants and trees from his homeland, including the first palm tree in Spain, which he immortalized in a melancholic poem about his own exile. He was a poet and a patron of the arts, attracting scholars, architects, and thinkers to his court. Under his rule, Cordoba began its transformation into one of the most brilliant and advanced cities in the world. Abd al-Rahman never called himself caliph, respecting the title held by the Abbasids, but in every other way, he was a king. He created an independent state that would not only survive but thrive for nearly 3 centuries, becoming a center of learning, art, and science while much of Europe was in the Dark Ages. The Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad, Al-Mansur, the very man who had ordered the destruction of his family, grudgingly admitted, "This is the Falcon of the Quraysh." He has crossed the sea, traversed the desert, and built a great kingdom for himself, all alone. Abd al-Rahman's story is more than just history. It's a testament to the power of human will. He was a man who lost everything: his family, his home, his status. He was hunted, betrayed, and left for dead. But he never surrendered. Out of the ashes of a fallen empire and the depths of personal tragedy, he forged a new destiny for himself and for an entire civilization. The lone fugitive who swam the Euphrates became the architect of a golden age. He is Abd-ur-Rahman I, the survivor, the state builder, the Falcon of Andalusia. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as incredible as we do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more epic tales from history. See you next time. His first order of business was to reclaim his own land. For years, he campaigned relentlessly, not with brute force alone, but with a clever mix of military might and strategic diplomacy. He offered amnesty to rebels, who submitted, but crushed those who resisted. One by one, the rebellious cities fell. He subdued the fortress of Bobastro, ending a decades-long rebellion. He pacified the volatile frontier regions. Within a decade, he had reunified Al-Andalus, under his absolute control, a feat his predecessors could only dream of. With his home secure, Abd al-Rahman turned his gaze outward. The Christian kingdoms to the north were a constant threat. In 920, he led a massive army north, securing a decisive victory at the Battle of Valdeunquera. This victory didn't just push back the frontier, it sent a clear message across the Pyrenees. A new power had arrived, one that could not be ignored. But his greatest rival lay to the south. The Fatimids in North Africa were not just a military threat. They were an ideological one. Their caliph claimed to be the rightful leader of all Muslims, a direct challenge to the authority of the Abbasid Caliph in distant Baghdad, and by extension, to Abd al-Rahman's own legitimacy. The Fatimids were actively spreading their influence, forming alliances with rebels within Al-Andalus. This was a battle for the soul of Western Islam. Abd al-Rahman knew he could not be seen as a mere emir, a provincial governor beholden to a powerless caliph in Baghdad. He needed a title that reflected his true power, a title that would put him on equal footing with his rivals in Baghdad and North Africa. He needed to be the ultimate authority. So, in the year 929, he made a declaration that would echo through history. He adopted the title of Caliph, Commander of the Faithful, and the regnal name Al-Nasir Lidin, Allah, the victor for the religion of God. This was a masterstroke of political genius. It severed the final symbolic ties to Baghdad, and established Cordoba as a new, independent center of Islamic power. The Caliphate of Cordoba was born. This wasn't just an empty title. The Caliphate became the engine of an unprecedented golden age. With political stability came immense economic prosperity. Al-Andalus was a hub of global trade. Its ports welcomed ships from across the Mediterranean, bringing spices from the east and timber from the north. Its workshops produced the finest silks, intricate ivory carvings, and world-renowned leather goods. Cordoban steel was legendary, sought after for swords and armor. The wealth of the caliphate was staggering. Gold and silver flowed into the treasury, funding a powerful professional army and a formidable navy that dominated the western Mediterranean. This allowed Abd al-Rahman to project his power far beyond his borders. He established protectorates over parts of North Africa to create a buffer against the Fatimids, and to control the vital trans-Saharan gold trade routes. This power and wealth attracted attention. Envoys from across the known world flocked to Cordoba, not just from rival Muslim states, but from the heart of Christian Europe. Ambassadors from the Byzantine Emperor in Constantinople and the Holy Roman Emperor Otto the Great, traveled to witness the splendor of the caliph's court. Imagine their journey. They would have traveled through a landscape of advanced irrigation, with water wheels turning and fields bursting with olives, figs, and pomegranates. They would arrive at Cordoba, the largest, most populous, and most sophisticated city in Europe. A city of 500,000 souls, with paved streets, streetlights, hundreds of public baths, libraries, and hospitals. At a time when London and Paris were little more than muddy towns, the visitors would be led through the city to the culmination of Abd al-Rahman's vision, the city palace of Madinat al-Zahra, the shining city, built on a hillside overlooking Cordoba. This was a statement of pure power and refined taste. A sprawling complex of palaces, mosques, gardens, and government offices, constructed with the most exotic materials, marble from across the sea, gold and precious stones. Legends tell of a hall with a pool of mercury that could be agitated to create dazzling reflections of light. This wasn't just a home. It was a symbol of the caliph's might, designed to awe and intimidate. The reception for foreign ambassadors was pure political theater. They would be led through a series of magnificent courtyards and halls, lined with perfectly disciplined guards, until they reached the throne room. There, they would find the Caliph, Abd al-Rahman, surrounded by opulence, a figure radiating absolute authority. The message was unmistakable. You are in the presence of one of the world's great powers. While Europe looked on with a mixture of admiration and fear, Abd al-Rahman fostered a culture of tolerance and intellectual curiosity within his borders. Cordoba became a magnet for scholars, poets, doctors, and scientists of all faiths. Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived and worked together, translating ancient Greek texts, making groundbreaking discoveries in medicine, mathematics, and astronomy. The Great Mosque of Cordoba, expanded under his reign, was an architectural marvel, and the city's libraries, holding hundreds of thousands of volumes, preserved knowledge that had been lost in the rest of Europe. Abd al-Rahman al-Nasser ruled for nearly 50 years. He had inherited a kingdom in pieces and transformed it into a mighty empire that was the political, economic, and cultural center of the Western world. He was a ruthless warrior, a brilliant statesman, and a visionary patron of the arts and sciences. His legacy is not just in the stones of Madinat al-Zahra or the arches of the Great Mosque. It is in the very idea of the Caliphate of Cordoba, beacon of civilization, a testament to what can be achieved when power is combined with vision. He built a world so magnificent that for centuries to come, it would be remembered as a lost paradise, a golden age when all of Europe looked to Al-Andalus and saw the future. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration of history's most fascinating stories. See you next time. Imagine a world of unparalleled beauty, where fountains dance in sun-drenched courtyards, and poetry fills the air. But even the brightest lights can dim. How did this magnificent society, a powerhouse of science, art, and military might, begin to crumble? It wasn't a single battle, or one decisive defeat. The first cracks appeared not on the battlefield, but within the hearts and minds of its people, born from the very success they had achieved. This is the story of how luxury, pride, and comfort slowly poisoned the soul of Al-Andalus, paving the way for its eventual downfall. Let's rewind to the Golden Age. Al-Andalus was the envy of the world. Cities like Cordoba, Seville, and Granada were centers of immense wealth. The first generations of conquerors and builders were driven by a powerful sense of purpose and discipline. They were pioneers, forged in hardship, united by faith and a common goal. They lived simply, focused on establishing and securing their new home. But their children and their children's children were born into a different world. They inherited wealth they didn't earn and power they didn't fight for. Comfort was their birthright, not a reward. The rugged martial spirit that had built Al-Andalus began to soften, replaced by a taste for leisure and luxury. The halls of power, once filled with hardened veterans and wise administrators, began to fill with courtiers who excelled in flattery and intrigue, not governance or warfare. The focus shifted from statecraft to spectacle. Rulers, once accessible leaders, became distant figures, enclosed in their lavish palaces. They vied with each other, not in piety or justice, but in the splendor of their courts, the size of their harems, and the extravagance of their feasts. This culture of indulgence trickled down through the ranks of the nobility. The pursuit of pleasure became a primary occupation. Lavish parties, expensive clothing, and exotic perfumes became status symbols, more important than scholarly achievement or military valor. High offices were no longer given to the most capable, but to the highest bidder or the most well-connected court favorite. Justice was for sale. Taxes, which were meant to fund the army and public works, were diverted to pay for the extravagant lifestyles of the ruling class. Simultaneously, the military, the very shield of Al-Andalus, began to rust. The old discipline faded. The sons of the elite, who once would have proudly led armies, now preferred the comfort of the court to the rigors of the campaign trail. Military leadership was often outsourced to mercenaries who were loyal to coin, not a cause. This decay wasn't immediately obvious. The army could still put on an impressive parade, with gleaming armor and fine horses. But in a real fight, discipline, training, and motivation are what count, and these were in short supply. The edge they once held over their northern Christian rivals was being dulled, day by day. Then there was the pride, or rather, the arrogance that grew from centuries of dominance. The leaders of Al-Andalus began to believe their own hype. They saw their civilization as superior and invincible. They underestimated the growing strength and determination of the Christian kingdoms to the north. These kingdoms, once fractured and weak, were slowly uniting. They were learning from their enemy, adopting new military tactics, and were fueled by a powerful religious zeal known as the Riq, while the emirs of Al-Andalus were busy competing with each other in poetry and palace building. The kings of Castile, Aragon, and Portugal were forging alliances and sharpening their swords. The rulers of Al-Andalus, blinded by their own splendor, dismissed the growing threat on their borders as a minor nuisance. They were too busy with their internal rivalries and power struggles to see the storm gathering on the horizon. This internal division was perhaps the most fatal symptom of the decline. The unity that had been the bedrock of their early success completely shattered. The centralized caliphate of Cordoba fractured into a patchwork of smaller, competing kingdoms known as the Tifas. Each Tifa king, ruling from his own miniature lavish court, saw his neighbors not as fellow Muslims, but as rivals. They fought each other more often than they fought the Christians. In a shocking turn of events, these Muslim rulers would even form alliances with Christian kings against other Muslims, paying them hefty tributes in gold to help them in their petty wars. This gold, ironically, was then used by the Christian kingdoms to fund their own armies, which would eventually be used to conquer the Tifas themselves. They were literally paying for their own destruction. So, when we look back at the fall of Al-Andalus, it's easy to point to the final battles, like the fall of Granada in 1492. But the real defeat happened much earlier. It happened in the opulent palaces where comfort replaced duty. It happened in the courts where flattery replaced truth. It happened in the treasuries where public funds were spent on private pleasures. And it happened in the hearts of a people who forgot the discipline and unity that had made them great. The story of Al-Andalus is a timeless and powerful lesson. It teaches us that the greatest threats to any society, any civilization, often come not from external enemies, but from within. It's a cautionary tale about how success can breed complacency, how luxury can erode strength, and how pride can lead to a devastating fall. The walls of Granada did not collapse overnight. They were slowly weakened, brick by brick, by the decay that had set in centuries before. Thank you for watching. If you found this reflection on history insightful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the stories that have shaped our world. We'll see you in the next one. The year is 1031. The magnificent Caliphate of Cordoba, once a beacon of learning, art, and power in Europe, has shattered. The golden age of Al-Andalus is over. In its place, a fractured landscape emerges, a mosaic of ambition and betrayal. This is the story of the Tifa kingdoms, a period where unity dissolved into 100 years of civil war, and brother turned against brother. Imagine a stunning vase, a masterpiece of craftsmanship, suddenly dropped and splintering into dozens of shards. Each piece, though beautiful on its own, has lost the strength and purpose of the whole. This was Al-Andalus. After the fall of Cordoba, the great empire broke into over 30 petty kingdoms, from Zaragoza in the north to Granada in the south, from Seville in the west to Valencia in the east. Local lords, governors, and ambitious generals declared themselves kings. These new rulers built lavish courts, competing to outdo one another in luxury and culture. They patronized poets, scientists, and architects, creating some of the most beautiful art and literature of the era. The Giralda of Seville and the Aljaferia Palace of Zaragoza are testaments to their refined tastes. But beneath this glittering surface, a dark and dangerous game was being played. The Tifa kings were consumed by jealousy and suspicion. The ruler of Seville eyed the lands of Granada. The king of Toledo schemed against his neighbor in Zaragoza. They saw each other not as fellow Muslims, but as rivals for power and territory. Alliances were made one day and broken the next. Trust was a currency more valuable and far rarer than gold. This constant infighting created a power vacuum, and the Christian kingdoms of the North Castile, Leon, and Aragon were more than happy to fill it. They watched from their strongholds as the once mighty Muslim power tore itself apart, and they saw an opportunity. The Christian kings began to play the Tifa rulers against each other, offering military support to one in exchange for land, and then offering the same to his rival the next day. And this is where the story takes its most tragic turn. The Tifa kings, desperate to gain an edge over their Muslim neighbors, began paying the Christian kingdoms for protection. This tribute, known as the pariahs, was a river of gold flowing from the wealthy cities of Al-Andalus into the coffers of their enemies. The very wealth that had built the libraries and mosques of Cordoba was now being used to arm the armies that would one day conquer them. Think about the bitter irony. Muslim kings were hiring Christian knights to fight against other Muslim kings. In 1085, this policy reached its disastrous conclusion. Alfonso VI of Castile, a master of this political game, had been taking tribute from the Tifa of Toledo for years. But tribute was no longer enough. He wanted the city itself. After a long siege, Toledo, the ancient capital of the Visigoths and a major center of Islamic learning, fell without a major battle. The king of Toledo had become so isolated and weakened by infighting that he was forced to surrender his city in exchange for a smaller, insignificant kingdom in Valencia. The fall of Toledo sent a shockwave across Al-Andalus. The Tifa kings suddenly realized the catastrophic consequences of their division. They had invited the fox into the henhouse, and now he was taking over. In a panic, they sought help from a new, formidable power in North Africa, the Almoravids. These were fierce, devout warriors, committed to a much stricter form of Islam. They were disgusted by what they saw as the decadence and weakness of the Tifa kings. Led by the formidable Yusuf ibn Tashfin, the Almoravids crossed the Strait of Gibraltar. They met the army of Alfonso VI at the Battle of Sagrajes in 1086. The combined forces of the Tifas and the Almoravids crushed the Castilian army. For a moment, it seemed like Al-Andalus was saved. The Tifa kings celebrated, believing they had found a powerful ally to protect them. But they had simply traded one master for another. Yusuf ibn Tashfin had no intention of being a hired guard. He saw the Tifa rulers as corrupt, unfit to rule, and guilty of betraying their faith by allying with Christians. One by one, he turned on the very kings who had invited him. He accused them of impiety and annexed their kingdoms into his growing North African empire. The kings of Granada, Seville, and others were deposed, exiled, or executed. The age of the Tifas was over, swallowed by the very force they had summoned for their salvation. The story of the Tifa kingdoms is a powerful lesson in history. It shows how internal division can be far more destructive than any external enemy. The wealth, culture, and military potential of Al-Andalus were immense. But they were squandered in petty squabbles and short-sighted rivalries. The kings of the Tifas chose personal power over collective strength, and in the end, they lost everything. Their legacy is a cautionary tale, a reminder that unity is not just a noble ideal, but a crucial condition for survival. The splintered vase could never be put back together, and the fall of Al-Andalus had begun in earnest. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like, share, and subscribe for more journeys into the dramatic pages of history. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a place where knowledge was treasured above gold, where art and science flourished under a sun-drenched sky. This was Al-Andalus, a beacon of civilization for centuries. But beacons can fade, and the light that once illuminated the world began to flicker. Today, we journey back to a time of profound sorrow, to witness the slow, heartbreaking twilight of a golden age. It began not with a bang, but with a whisper of discord. The once mighty Caliphate of Cordoba, a symbol of unity and power, shattered into a mosaic of smaller, rival kingdoms, known as tifes. What was once a singular, powerful voice became a cacophony of competing interests. Brothers turned against brothers, and the strength that came from unity was squandered on petty squabbles and internal power struggles. This fragmentation was the first crack in the magnificent facade of Andalusian civilization, a deep, foundational weakness that its enemies would soon exploit. The dream of a united Al-Andalus was dying, and its people were about to pay the price. The year is 1085. A wave of dread washes over the hearts of Muslims and Jews across the Iberian Peninsula. Toledo, the former Visigothic capital, a city of immense strategic and symbolic importance, has fallen. It wasn't taken by a swift, brutal assault, but by a slow, agonizing siege that squeezed the life out of it. The Christian king, Alfonso VI, cleverly playing the Tifa kings against each other, tightened his grip until the city gasped its last breath. Imagine the letters sent from within the besieged walls, filled with desperate pleas for help that went unanswered. Imagine the merchants watching their fortunes dwindle, the scholars seeing their libraries threatened, the mothers wondering how they would feed their children. The fall of Toledo was more than a military defeat. It was a psychological catastrophe. It sent a clear, terrifying message. No city was safe. The heart of Al-Andalus had been pierced, and the wound was deep, perhaps fatal. This single event ignited a century-spanning conflict, a slow, grinding reconquest that would reshape Iberia forever. In the wake of Toledo's fall, a desperate call for aid was sent across the Strait of Gibraltar to the Almoravids, a formidable dynasty from North Africa. They arrived as saviors, fierce warriors who initially pushed back the Christian advance, but their arrival came at a cost. The vibrant, multicultural, and often tolerant atmosphere of the Tifa courts was replaced by a stricter, more austere interpretation of faith. The poetry, the music, the philosophical debates, the very soul of Andalusian culture began to be suppressed. It was a tragic paradox. In seeking to save the body of Al-Andalus, its spirit was being choked. The very saviors who were meant to preserve their way of life became its unwitting undertakers. The joy and intellectual curiosity that had defined the era were replaced by suspicion and rigidity. A new layer of fear descended, not just from the enemy without, but from the supposed protectors within. The vibrant colors of Al-Andalus were slowly being painted over in monochrome. Fast forward to the year 1236. The bells toll not for prayer, but for conquest. Cordoba, the jewel of the world, the heart of the old caliphate, has fallen. This was not just another city. This was the city of 1,000 mosques, the home of the Great Mosque, an architectural wonder that left visitors breathless. It was a city where streets were paved and lit at night, a marvel in an age when most of Europe was shrouded in darkness. Its libraries held hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, preserving the knowledge of the ancient world. To lose Cordoba was to lose a piece of the world's soul. Imagine the silence that fell over the courtyard of the Great Mosque, once filled with the murmur of scholars and the devout. Imagine the smoke rising from libraries, where centuries of knowledge turned to ash. The conquerors, led by Ferdinand III of Castile, walked through streets that were once the epicenter of learning, now filled with the echoes of what was lost. The fall of Cordoba was a devastating blow, a symbol that the end was truly near. The light of the world, it seemed, was being extinguished, one great city at a time. 12 years later, in 1248, the final, crushing blow for central Al-Andalus landed. Seville, the beautiful, prosperous city on the banks of the Guadalquivir River, surrendered after a long and grueling siege. Seville was a hub of commerce, its ports bustling with ships from across the known world. Its gardens were legendary, its palaces opulent. The Giralda, its magnificent minaret, stood as a testament to the city's wealth and devotion. The siege was a masterpiece of medieval engineering and relentless pressure. A chain was stretched across the river, cutting off supplies. Starvation gnawed at the city's inhabitants. Hope withered with each passing day. When the gates finally opened, it marked the end of an era. The surrender of Seville meant that the Guadalquivir Valley, the agricultural and economic heartland of Al-Andalus, was gone forever. All that remained was the small, isolated emirate of Granada, a final, defiant outpost clinging to the mountains, a beautiful but fragile remnant of a shattered dream. With the fall of the great cities, a profound silence began to settle over the land. It was the silence of empty lecture halls where philosophers like Averroes once debated. It was the silence of abandoned workshops where artisans crafted intricate marvels. It was the silence of gardens untended, their fountains running dry. The vibrant, multilingual tapestry of life, where Muslims, Jews, and Christians had, for periods, coexisted and created something unique, was being unraveled thread by thread. For the people who remained, life was irrevocably changed. Many were forced to convert, their heritage and beliefs suppressed under a new rule. They became known as Moriscos, their every move watched with suspicion. Their language, their customs, their very identity became a secret to be hidden. Others became refugees, undertaking perilous journeys, carrying with them only the memories of their lost homes. They were scattered across North Africa and the Ottoman Empire, a diaspora of the displaced, forever mourning a paradise lost. Their story is one of immense sadness, the story of being made strangers in your own land. As we stand in the quiet ruins and converted mosques of what was once Al-Andalus, we are confronted with a powerful lesson about the fragility of civilization. Al-Andalus wasn't destroyed in a single day. It crumbled slowly, weakened by internal division, consumed by external ambition, and suffocated by intolerance. Its decline shows us that unity is precious, that knowledge is fragile, and that fear is the most potent poison to a society's soul. The loss was not just for the people of Al-Andalus, but for all of humanity. We can only wonder what more could have been achieved, what other wonders could have been created, if that light had not been extinguished. The story of Al-Andalus is a bittersweet symphony, a tale of breathtaking heights and heartbreaking depths. It reminds us that history is not just a collection of dates and battles, but a human story of love, loss, creation, and destruction. In the heart of Andalusia, a city breathes, its every stone a testament to centuries of splendor and sorrow. This is Granada, the last jewel of Al-Andalus, a final, defiant whisper of a golden age. For over 250 years, the Nasrids held this kingdom, a beacon of art, science, and culture, while the world around it changed irrevocably. Imagine walking these same cobblestone streets under the shadow of the Alhambra. The air, once filled with the scent of jasmine and the melodies of the oud, now carries a palpable tension. From the north, the winds of the Reconquista blow stronger each day. The Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, have united their crowns, their eyes fixed on this last bastion of Islam in Iberia. Within the palace walls, intrigue is a constant companion. The court of Boabdil, the last Nasrid sultan, is a nest of ambition and fear. Factions vie for power, betrayals are whispered in gilded halls, and the common people look to the snow-capped Sierra Nevada, praying for a miracle that seems ever more distant. Every sunset over the Albaicin feels like it could be the last. The markets still teem with life, merchants trading silks and spices, but a sense of impending doom hangs heavy. Diplomats come and go, their negotiations futile against the tide of history. Sieges tighten the noose, cutting off supplies and hope. The fountains of the Alhambra continue to flow, their gentle splashing a melancholic soundtrack to the end of an era. Granada is not just a city. It is a memory poised on the brink of extinction. The intricate tilework, the poetic arches, the lush gardens of the Generalife, they all speak of a profound love for beauty, a civilization that reached for paradise on earth. But as the Christian armies gather at the gates, the question echoes through every courtyard: how long can this dream hold? This is the story of Granada's final, heartbreaking breath, a poignant farewell to a world that was about to vanish forever. Join us as we explore the twilight of Al-Andalus. The year is 1492. A cold wind blows through the narrow streets of Granada, the last jewel of Al-Andalus. For centuries, this city had been a beacon of culture, science, and art, a place where Muslims, Jews, and Christians coexisted. But now, after a decade of brutal warfare, the city is on its knees, surrounded by the armies of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. The air, once filled with the scent of jasmine and the sounds of poetry, is now thick with fear and uncertainty. On the 2nd of January, the city's final ruler, Muhammad XII, known to the Spaniards as Boabdil, rides out to meet the Catholic monarchs. He carries the keys to the Alhambra, the magnificent palace that had been the heart of his kingdom. It's a moment heavy with symbolism. As he hands over the keys, he surrenders not just a city, but nearly 800 years of Islamic rule in Iberia. The terms of the surrender, the Treaty of Granada, had promised religious freedom. The Muslims, now called Mudayars, were guaranteed the right to practice their faith, keep their property, and live under their own laws. It was a promise of peace, a fragile hope in a time of conquest. But promises made in wartime are often the first casualties of peace. The initial tolerance quickly eroded. Within a few years, the atmosphere soured. The powerful Cardinal Cisneros arrived, determined to erase every trace of Islam from Spain. He saw the treaty not as a pact to be honored, but as an obstacle to be dismantled. Public burnings of priceless Arabic books, filled with knowledge accumulated over centuries, became a common spectacle in the plazas of Granada. The message was clear. The culture of Al-Andalus was to be extinguished. By 1499, the pressure became unbearable. Forced conversions began. The choice was stark: baptism or exile. Mosques were consecrated as churches, their elegant minarets silenced or converted into bell towers. The call to prayer, which had echoed through the valleys for generations, was replaced by the peal of church bells. For those who chose to stay and convert, the Morisco's life was a constant struggle. They were watched, suspected, and persecuted. Their new faith never fully trusted. They practiced their old traditions in secret, whispered prayers behind closed doors, living a double life under the ever-watchful eye of the Inquisition. For others, the only option was to leave the land their ancestors had called home for centuries. The exodus began. Families packed what little they could carry and made their way to the coast, looking across the sea towards North Africa. They were leaving behind their homes, their fields, and the graves of their loved ones. Legend tells of Boabdil, as he looked back one last time at Granada from a mountain pass. His mother is said to have told him, "You do well to weep like a woman for what you could not defend as a man." That spot is still known today as the last sigh of the Moor. It wasn't just a sigh for a lost kingdom. It was a lament for a lost world. The fall of Granada marked the end of an era, the silencing of a vibrant civilization that had given so much to Europe. The minarets fell silent, the libraries burned, and a rich chapter of history closed in sorrow and exile. The story of Al-Andalus serves as a timeless, poignant reminder of how quickly worlds can vanish, and how fragile the promises of peace can be. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more journeys into the past.